He was declared dead 18 months ago. No trace, no survivors. But this morning, a bloodied K9 burst into a police station with a little girl on his back and something carved into her skin. He didn't bark for help. He came back to finish what no one else could. And what he exposed shook the nation. The morning began like any other at the Spring Hollow Police Department. A thin veil of fog clung to the tall pine trees just outside the windows, the kind that made everything feel a little slower, a little quieter. Inside, officers moved with the sleepy rhythm of routine sipping lukewarm coffee, flipping through paperwork, chatting about local gossip and last night's snowfall. The hum of fluorescent lights and the soft hiss of the old coffee machine were the only sounds in the room, until the front doors slammed open with a force that shattered the quiet. A sudden gust of cold air swept through the station, carrying with it something no one could have expected. Charging through the entrance was a large black Malinois, soaked in blood, panting hard, his eyes wild and focused, draped limply across his back, a child, a little girl, no older than 7, her arms hanging lifeless, her head lolling against his fur. Her dress was torn, her skin bruised and stained. Most disturbingly, there was a crude QR code carved into her wrist, not tattooed, but etched with a burning blade. A brand, a barcode. The room froze. For a moment, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. "Get a medic," someone shouted, diving for the emergency phone. As paramedics rushed in, the dog snarled low, defensive, not out of aggression but warning. He wouldn't let anyone near her. His eyes flicked from face to face, reading intentions. He stood between her and the world, unmoving, guarding her with the last of his strength. Only when the stretcher arrived did he finally step aside. Not far, just enough. He lay down beside her as they worked, his breathing shallow, his fur slick with drying blood that wasn't all his. His head rested by her hand, eyes fixed on hers, though she remained unconscious. One officer, trembling, reached for the canine's microchip scanner. He ran it along the back of the dog's neck. The device beeped once, then displayed a message that turned everyone cold. Fang 17A. Status: deceased. Handler: classified. Murmurs swept through the room. That can't be right. Is this real? He's dead. That dog's dead. The name triggered memories buried under layers of clearance. A failed operation 18 months ago. A covert rescue gone dark. The mission was erased. No bodies were recovered. All K9 units and handlers were listed as KIA killed in action. And yet here he was, bloodied, breathing, carrying a girl who shouldn't have been found. The shift commander looked around the room and then said the words that hung in the air like a storm about to break. "Get me the FBI. Now." By the time the agents arrived, the girl had been taken to the trauma center, but the dog, the ghost, remained, silent, alert, waiting. And every person in that room was left asking the same unthinkable question. How does a dead dog come back, carrying a living witness? The call came in just after noon. By then, news of the dog had already made its way through internal channels, a ghost from a buried mission, returning with blood on his coat and a child on his back. At the Federal Rapid Response Center, the air turned electric. Analysts gathered around the biometric station as Ava's data was processed. She was still unconscious, but the scans told a deeper story. Recent trauma, industrial zip ties, traces of soil from at least 2 known trafficking corridors, and 1 chilling match. Her blood work matched forensic evidence from 4 unsolved child abduction cases spread across 3 states. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern, and Shadow was the only one who knew where it led. In the briefing room, Special Agent Elena Price stood over a cluttered table of maps, crime scene photos, and satellite prints. A former military vet tech turned FBI profiler, she knew what silence could mean. When the report flashed across the screen, Unit Fang 17A, active, she didn't question it. She simply asked, "Where is he now?" Downstairs, Shadow paced. His coat had been cleaned, wounds treated just enough to stabilize him, but his energy was electric. His nails clicked against the tile as he moved to the door again and again, growling low, tail rigid. He wasn't done. He wasn't resting. He was waiting. Elena arrived quietly. She didn't call his name. She simply held up his old tactical harness. The moment he saw it, Shadow froze. Then, with a calm resolve, he walked over and sat. Let her strap it on, as if every instinct he once lived by had snapped back into place. Let him go, Elena said firmly. Wherever he came from, we're going. Within minutes, the convoy formed black SUVs, mobile command units, and 2 SWAT trucks. Shadow led the way, seated in the front vehicle, eyes locked forward like a compass only he could read. They followed him for miles. Snow dusted the road's edge. Pines blurred past. Then, without hesitation, Shadow barked once and veered down a narrow service road. At the end, a rusted gate half buried under vines and frost. Beyond it, an abandoned water treatment plant. Quiet, forgotten. But Shadow didn't slow down. He leapt through the gap in the fence and vanished into the dark. And every agent behind him knew. He wasn't just leading them into a building, he was leading them into whatever had taken him in the first place. The moment Shadow entered the building, something changed. He moved faster, more urgent, his nose pressed low to the ground. The old water plant groaned with age-rusted valves, mildew-coated walls, puddles of standing water, but Shadow didn't hesitate. He darted past collapsed stairwells, ignored flickering hazard lights, and charged into a narrow side corridor. Then he stopped and began to dig. It was concrete, smooth, reinforced, hidden beneath layers of dirt and industrial dust. But Shadow, relentless, began pawing furiously at the floor. His claws scratched deep, his breathing sharp, tail rigid. A low growl vibrated in his chest. Agent Elena Price knelt beside him. Get thermal, now. The drone tech powered up the scanner. A faint buzz. Then 4 dots pulsed on the screen. Movement detected, he said. 6 meters down. 4 heat signatures. Clustered tight. Set charges, Elena ordered. Quiet and fast. In minutes, the concrete cracked open with a deep metallic groan, revealing a stairwell descending into pitch-black silence. The air below was heavy, thick with mold, chemicals, and something else. Something human. Flashlights cut through the dark. Wires coiled along the walls like veins. Crates lined the floor, each marked with printed barcodes and intake numbers. No names, just codes. A table in the center held folders, duct-taped, and labeled inside were photos of children, eyes vacant, some crying, some sedated. A SWAT officer cursed under his breath. At the far end, a steel door, scratched, padlocked, dried blood along its base. Shadow approached slowly. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He simply stopped, stared. His hackles rose, body frozen, ears pointed toward the silence behind that door. He knew, and this time, no one questioned it. The hallway leading to the final door narrowed, closing in like a throat. The steel surface was pitted with rust. Its lock thick and recently reinforced. Someone had known this moment might come. Blood pooled at the threshold in a dried smear, dark against the cement. Shadow stood still before it, his body tense but quiet, his eyes locked forward. Inside, the enemy was waiting. Elena's voice cut through comms. Breach on my mark. A quiet nod passed through the SWAT stack. Breacher prepped the charge, placed it at the hinge. Behind them, the hum of the biometric scanner glowed faintly green on a nearby panel. Too clean, too modern for a space this decrepit. Someone had invested in protecting this room. 3, 2, 1. The explosion wasn't loud, just a controlled rip of pressure that sucked the air from the hallway. The steel door buckled and fell inward. Smoke spilled out, curling like breath from a sleeping giant. Lights snapped on. Shadows darted. Shouts erupted. FBI! Hands in the air! The first suspect didn't hesitate. He opened fire. Flashbangs exploded, but in the chaos, Shadow moved faster than anyone. A blur of black muscle and instinct, he lunged mid-shot. his body colliding with the gunman's chest just as the weapon discharged. The bullet cracked into the concrete wall, missing its mark by inches. Shadow's jaws clamped down on the man's forearm with a sickening crunch, dragging him down. Screams. The second suspect, younger, wiry, didn't go for a weapon. He went for a drive. A black biometric case tucked beneath a desk, wired into a surveillance console. He ripped it loose, bolted for the far door. "Stop him!" Elena shouted. The man reached the exit, turned and raised a pistol. The shot came fast. A single burst, sharp and clean. Shadow yelped short, guttural, and collapsed mid-run. Blood sprayed across the floor. For one agonizing second, everything froze. Elena shouted, "Agents advanced," but Shadow moved. He didn't stay down. His body trembled, legs shaky, but he stood. The bullet had hit high in the shoulder, not fatal. Not yet. And his eyes, they didn't blink. They locked onto the target. Determined. Familiar. He charged again. No hesitation. No flinch. The suspect fired once more, missed. Then Shadow slammed into him like a wrecking ball, jaws locking onto his hip, dragging him down hard. The drive clattered across the floor. The man screamed, trying to kick free, but it was over. SWAT poured into the room seconds later, hands cuffed, weapons cleared. The children were found inside a reinforced cage against the wall, too weak to cry, too shocked to scream. One of them, barely older than Ava, whispered something soft. "Shadow." And then, as if he had waited just long enough, the dog finally let go. He staggered toward Elena, limping, his sides soaked with blood. His legs gave out just as he reached the biometric drive. He collapsed beside it, resting one paw over the metal casing like a soldier guarding a fallen flag. Elena dropped to her knees, hand on his neck. "Stay with me," she whispered. "You're not done. Not yet." But Shadow didn't move. His chest rose once, twice, slower now. Behind them, agents secured the suspects, freed the children, and tagged the evidence. But in that moment, in the dim light of that final room, all eyes were on the bloody Canine, lying in silence beside the very thing he'd fought to protect. He hadn't come this far to survive. He'd come to finish what no one else could. And he had. ChatGPT Dernier. The forensic hub at FBI headquarters pulsed with cold light. Rows of monitors glowed with data, pulled from the biometric drive Shadow had nearly died to protect. His vest bloodied, torn lay folded on the table near the server rack. Untouched, sacred. No one spoke above a whisper. No one dared disturb what now felt like hallowed ground. Ava was stable. The children from the bunker were safe. Shadow was still in surgery. But here, in this room, the real war had begun. Folder after folder blinked open, each labeled in strings of alphanumeric code. Inside, surveillance videos, transport logs, transaction histories. But it wasn't just names or numbers. It was structure. An entire pipeline, routes connecting cities like veins, staging houses disguised as nonprofits, buyer lists sorted by region, every child tagged by age, medical history, risk level. Some were flagged as repeatable assets. The horror wasn't in what they found. It was in how much there was. An analyst stepped back from her screen, face pale. "This isn't just a trafficking ring," she muttered. "It's a chain. Global. Industrial. Like logistics for children." Silence fell again. One screen showed encrypted chats between handlers and corrupted local officials. Another displayed a rotating heat map of movement across state lines, exactly the same corridors Shadow had taken. Elena stared at the map, her hands flat on the table. It was everything. Proof, structure, pattern, names, orders. She reached for the red file marked Wakefield Protocola, long-prepared federal contingency plan that, until today, had no confirmed target. She signed her name, bold, final. "All teams, move now." That night, raids lit up 3 states. SWAT units stormed shell companies, storm drains, and backrooms behind warehouses. Children were found terrified but alive. Evidence piled in by the hour. Arrests came like dominoes. For the first time in years, the system cracked, and the world began to see what a dog had uncovered with nothing but instinct and a refusal to give up. ChatGPT Dernoy. The military trauma center was quiet, sterile, almost reverent. Beyond its reinforced walls, the world was screaming with headlines, flooding news feeds and front pages alike. Dead 9 returns with keys to a national nightmare. Silent Fang unit lives, and exposes a hidden empire. The dog that refused to stay buried. But inside this room, there were no cameras, no press, no medals. Just a black-furred Malinois named Shadow, lying motionless on a medical bed, his body tethered to machines that kept rhythm where his strength had once done the work. Bandages wrapped his torso, an oxygen mask sat lightly over his muzzle, and IV lines traced along one foreleg, dripping quiet lifeblood back into the creature who had given every drop for something greater. Across from him, Elena Price sat in silence. No badge, no gun, just her hands, clasped tightly on her lap, and her eyes red, but focused. She hadn't slept since the operation. Not until he did. A knock came. A nurse opened the door and guided in a small figure. Ava, now awake, pale, thin but standing. She didn't speak. She hadn't uttered a word since they found her. But when she saw Shadow's face, her lips parted with the start of something, not a word, but breath, emotion, memory. In her hands, she carried a tablet. She tapped it once. The screen lit up with a photo of Shadow in his handler vest, taken long before the mission that went dark. She held it close, then turned it toward him, as if to say, "I remember you." Then she walked to the bedside and gently placed her small hand on his paw. Outside the room, the front lobby of the trauma center overflowed with deliveries, flowers, cards, tiny stuffed animals, notes scrawled in crayon. "Thank you, Shadow." A wall of names, dozens of them, was being taped up by volunteers. Each name belonged to a child once listed as missing, now found because one dog refused to die quietly. Inside, Shadow didn't move, but his vitals held steady, a flicker on the heart monitor, a breath, a fight still waging beneath fur and scar. Elena finally stood. She stepped forward, leaning down close, her voice a whisper only he could hear. "You didn't bark to be heard. You barked to wake the world up." And he had. He hadn't been trained to speak, but he'd told a story. He hadn't worn a uniform anymore, but he'd led an army. He hadn't made it back for glory, but for justice, for truth, for children who couldn't run and voices that had long gone silent. There would be no parade, no speeches. Only this, a quiet room, a dog on a bed, a girl who survived, and a nation forever changed by a creature it once left behind.